Hey, howdy, hey, folks. This is Mrs. Johnson, the Agro Wisdom Channel. It is again kind of late on a Thursday night, but we are here and we're recording videos and it's going to be amazing. Um, Today we're talking about some gardening basics, more like homesteading basics, agriculture basics. I might change the title of this as we get going. Today we're talking about guardian area measurements. This does apply to livestock as well. You can do some of these calculations with or with livestock and other things, and I have examples of that. So let's jump into how exactly do we measure the area that we are doing agriculture in, and why we would be measuring that at all. Why is this important? Water garden area measurements. They calculate how much you can plant or raise in your garden, pasture, whatever it is. And we do it because it helps us maximize our garden efficiency, our pasture efficiency. Um, and by understanding how much we are using the land, we're then able to do other math that we'll probably talk about in different videos, like fertilizing and watering and feeding and stuff like that. So, first and foremost, you want to measure your spaces that you're using, in this case, specifically your garden spaces, and you want to create an accurate map of said space with every little thing in it. This map is super useful for like lots and lots of things outside of this area calculation. Um, right, north, south, this little map labels north, south, east, west, has measurements on everything, and everything that looks to be the same size is presumed to be the same size. And we can, estimate some of these other ones. Um, but we have enough information to get a very accurate picture of how much land we are actually farming. Um, And when it comes down to actually buying seeds, we can figure out how much we need. When it comes to how many chickens or how many pigs or how many cows we can actually put on the land, we can figure that out with a really accurate map. And then once we know our sizing, we're going to start assigning things to places, specifically crops. This is most common for crop systems, especially diversified crop systems, of identifying, oh, like these examples, like you're going to put your potato bed up at the top, you're going to put your carrots in a certain place. Maybe if you're raising cows and pigs, you put your pigs in a certain place and your cows in another. Or if you've got a bunch of heifers and you've got a bunch of cow calves, maybe you put your new heifers in your replacement heifers in one place, your cow calves in another, and your bulls in another place, and you can all label that on your map. And then you calculate from knowing where you're going to put things, how many of said things that you can put in each one of those spots, and write that down. And then last but not least, you move your things, you put your things in that place and you plant, or you move your cows. So, last but not least, we're gonna actually talk about how to do that math. That was a very brief, rushed explanation of why we why we want to understand why, or why we want to know how this math works. Um, and why we want to know how to do this math. How do we do it? We measure our area, we write it down, and we find out the spacing of the crops or the livestock that we're using. So you need two pieces of information, the stuff you have and the stuff you want to put there, and the space requirements for both. So first and foremost, we're going to measure the space that we have. We do that by calculating square footage, which is length times width of total area, particularly for squares, rectangles, things of that nature, things that can be easily divided into squares and rectangles, really easy to get square footage on, or square acreage, right? Length times width. For this whole video, we're going to talk about this 19-inch by 17.5-inch square. And if we multiply our length, 72.5, by our width, 19, together, we get a lot of inches. And I didn't write down how many inches, but we're going to talk about square footage a lot because square footage is often easier. So you take all of your inch measurements, you multiply those together, and then you divide it by 12 to put it into feet, right? So 72.5 times 19 divided by 12. Note the parentheses. I did a video on PEMDAS. Watch it if you're confused. 114.8 feet is what we get with this square specifically. Now, this square is like a foot and a half-ish by like 6 feet, if that helps you. So it's like a foot and a quarter, foot and a half by like 6 feet. And we get 114.8 feet squared of usable space. And then let's calculate crop spacing first. And then we'll talk about the animal spacing. First, crops. So what we do, right? We figured out how much space we've got. Now we need to figure out how much space the things that we're putting on it needs. So we calculate crop spacing by doing the same thing. You multiply your row spacing by your seed spacing, so your length times your width. In this case, right, we have seed spacing 1 inch. They are 1 inch apart. And our row spacing is 2 feet apart for dill. This is dill. Specifically, right? So 1 inch times 24 inches, in parentheses, divide by 12, is 2 feet squared. If we were to do chickens for this example, I did a quick Google search, and Google told me that chickens need 3 to 5 feet squared per chicken, right? So in this ideal world, we're either going to plant dill on our little 114 feet, or we're going to put some chickens on it, and we're going to figure out the math, right? And we can go through and we can plant all the things once we figure that out, right? And we can kind of start drawing that too, of like, if we go back, if we put one every inch by 24 inches, right? And so I skipped one. Look at me. So now we put those two pieces of information together, our square area that we have to use and our item requirements. So for crops, it looks a little different than, it looks, same formula, looks slightly different in some of the vernacular that we use. So we take that width times length measurement and we divide it by the seed spacing that's required. So our bed spacing is 114.8 feet. Our plant spacing requirements is 2 feet squared. And so then we divide our bed spacing by our plant. So 114.8 divided by 2 is 57 to 58, depending on how you round and how tight you want to squeeze that. So what that means is if we were to plant this bed, we'd need between 57 and 58 viable seeds in this plot. What about chickens? What happens if we put chickens here? Same math, um, width times length divided by space requirements, right? So our bed spacing 114.8 feet squared. Our plant, our this is not plants. We're not talking about plants. We're talking about chickens. Chickens need 3 to 5 feet squared. So we then do the math. Bed divide by chicken spacing. So sorry, I did not correct my verbiage on this. 114.8 divided by 3 is 48. 114.8 divided by 5 is 22. So we can put anywhere between 22 and 48 chickens on this 114 feet. Now, I will mention here that you can do a little bit of the same math with crops, depending on how well you know the crop. You can tightly bundle them, you cannot tightly bundle them. It's really farmer's preference, based on experience and the land that you have and the environment that you have. When it comes to, do I do closer to 22 or do I do closer to 48 on 114.8 feet? I hope to cover more of the things that would make that decision a bit more feasible to answer for the folks that maybe can't answer that in future videos. So if you have specific questions, drop them in the comments below and we will talk about it in a future video. Fingers crossed. Hopefully. So that leaves one last thing to talk about, which is finding out how much soil or how much bedding you might need for said chicken or said chickens or said dill seeds. And you do this by finding cubic footage or cubic spacing, which is width times length times height of the bed, right? In this case, we're going to assume that this is a raised bed that we're trying to fill with soil. And when you go to the hardware store or the garden center, they're going to sell soil either in cubic feet or cubic yards. Yards you can calculate for if you've got feet. A lot of places will help you do that calculation. If you're trying to convert up to yards. But, right, we're trying to fill this box with soil. We already have the plant spacing. We already have our width times length, which is 114.8, 3/4 of a foot, 114.8 feet squared. Our bed height is 11.6 inches. 0.6 is equivalent to the 5/8 measurement that's labeled here. And so before we do anything, we have to convert our inches over to feet or vice versa. Because we're trying to get into feet, we're going to convert our inches over to feet. So 11.6 divided by 12 is 0.96 feet. So then we multiply, right? In order to find out the soil needed or the space within cubic feet that we need of soil, we would multiply our 114.8 times 0.96 and get 110.2 feet cubed. So we would take that 110.2 feet cubed and go to wherever we're buying soil or wherever we're getting soil and go, I need 110 cubic feet. And a lot of soil bags are sold in cubic feet, and 110 cubic feet is a lot to buy from a store. That like a hardware store, you might have better like going to a garden center, like a nursery or something. They would probably be able to supply that much soil for you, because that is a lot of soil for like a tiny little hardware store. Maybe like a bigger one like Ace or Lowe's, but anyway, Now, we can do the same math to find out how much bedding we need for our animals. Right? Same measurement, very similar to the like space usage question. So width times length times bedding depth, right? We've already identified our bed space for this square is 114.8 feet squared. Um, Again, did a quick Google search. Google told me that chickens should have at least 3 inches of bedding in their coop. So we take that 3 inches, we convert it over to feet by dividing it by 12. 3 but divide by 12 is a quarter, 0.25 feet. And so then the space, the bedding that we need, I didn't change the vernacular here either. Look at me, bad noodle. Anyway, 114.8 times 0.25 is 28.7 feet cubed. So that I could probably bring into a feed store and go, give me 20, the closest thing to 28 cubic feet, 28, 29 cubic feet that you have in store. Like how many bags of wood shavings would that be? And they would probably help you do that math. And so that leaves us with all the math and things that we could start doing in terms of garden area calculations. If you need more examples, if you want some clarity, if you're confused on something, feel free to drop questions in the comments. If you want me to elaborate or give more examples, totally fair, totally game, just let me know and I will be here. Alrighty. I'm gonna leave now and do the awkward Zoom pause while I pause the recording. Thank you so much.